I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume. So I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. So we continue in Alma. We're reading the famous war chapters. We're going to be skipping around a lot here. And because we got these two theaters. We got the Eastern Theater and we got the Western Theater. Moroni is commanding most of the action in the East, and Antipas is our main commander in the West, with Helaman joining him as a volunteer commander over the 2,000 stripling warriors. Now, the last thing we read was Helaman joining Antipas. Before we continue anymore, we're going to skip to chapter 53. Mormon, in recording all this, records everything out of order. He does a good job. He does a brilliant job of actually recording everything and how he does it, but if we're doing it chronologically, it's all out of order. So we're going to go back to 53. Now, the first half of this chapter will come later, because that's in the 28th year, and right now we're in the 26th. But in this chapter, he talks about the sons of the Ammonites, the 2,000 stripling warriors. And since we've already read them joining the army in the West, let us read what Mormon says in chapter 53. We pick it up in verse 10. And now behold, I have somewhat to say concerning the people of Ammon, who in the beginning were Lamanites. But by Ammon and his brethren, or rather by the power of the word of God, they had been converted unto the Lord, and they had been brought down into the land of Zarahemla, and had ever since been protected by the Nephites. And because of their oath, they had been kept from taking up arms against their brethren. For they had taken an oath that they never would shed blood more, and according to their oath they would have perished. Yea, they would have suffered themselves to have fallen into the hands of their brethren, had it not been for the pity and the exceeding love which Ammon and his brethren had had for them. And for this cause they were brought down into the land of Zarahemla, and they ever had been protected by the Nephites. But it came to pass that when they saw the danger and the many afflictions and tribulations which the Nephites bore for them, they were moved with compassion, and were desirous to take up arms in defense of their country. But behold, as they were about to take their weapons of war, they were overpowered by the persuasions of Helaman and his brethren, for they were about to break the oath which they had made, and Helaman feared lest by so doing they should lose their souls. Therefore all those who had entered into this covenant were compelled to behold their brethren wade through their afflictions and their dangerous circumstances at this time. But behold, it came to pass, they had many sons who had not entered into a covenant, that they would not take their weapons of war to defend themselves against their enemies. Therefore they did assemble themselves together at this time, as many as were able to take up arms, and they called themselves Nephites. And they entered into a covenant to fight for the liberty of the Nephites, yea, to protect the land unto the laying down of their lives. Yea, even they covenanted that they never would give up their liberty, but they would fight in all cases to protect the Nephites and themselves from bondage. Now behold, there were 2,000 of those young men who entered into this covenant and took their weapons of war to defend their country. And now behold, as they never had hitherto been a disadvantage to the Nephites, they became now at this period of time also a great support. For they took their weapons of war, and they would that Helaman should be their leader. And they were all young men, and they were exceedingly valiant for courage, and also for strength and activity. But behold, this was not all. They were all men who were true at all times to whatsoever thing they were entrusted. Yea, they were men of truth and soberness, for they had been taught to keep the commandments of God, and to walk uprightly before him. And now it came to pass that Helaman did march at the head of his 2,000 stripling soldiers to the support of the people in the borders of the land on the south by the west sea. And thus ended the 28th year of the reign of the judges over the people of Nephi. Now, you'll note that this talks about the 28th year here at the end, but Helaman actually marched forth in the 26th year, as we've already read. The chapter 53 begins its story in the 28th year. We read about Moroni there, but we will read that in a little bit when we get to the 28th year. But notice what Mormon is saying about the Ammonites here, the people of Ammon. And this is a fairly common thing with human psychology. Is when we are resolved, we can take most any kind of punishment to our own selves. But we don't like watching other people suffer. Good people don't want to watch other people suffer. And that's why if you want to manipulate people, you don't threaten them, you threaten their family. You threaten the people that they love. And so the people of Ammon, they still support the army. They're sending the provisions and all that like they agreed, but they're seeing the danger. They're seeing their brethren, the rest of the Nephites, are dying in battle to defend them. And we can see this very human reaction. I want to get out there and help. And they were going to, but Helaman persuaded them not to. He said, no, we won't accept your help. Not in this way. You can't do this. It says they were compelled to lay down their arms. Helaman said, no, we won't accept this kind of help from you. But then you have the 2,000 young men. And you can see how this works. And when we read about it with Helaman, it just briefly kind of said he got 2,000 men, young men, that were willing to fight. But this tells us that it wasn't even, Helaman didn't call for volunteers. They saw their parents' anguish. They saw the Nephites suffering for them. And these young men came together as a group. They held a meeting. 2,000 of them came together on their own and said, we have not taken that oath, and we are going to take our own oath. We're going to make our own covenant that we will fight to defend our people. And they call themselves Nephites. Notice this. Up to this point, all those who took the original covenant not to fight, they called themselves the people of Ammon, or the anti-Nephi Lehi's. Their children who were born after they moved up into the land of Nephi here, up into the land of Zarahemla, they're now calling themselves Nephites. They are uniting into one. Up to this point, they were kind of separate. They were their own people. Now we're coming into one. We're becoming one nation. Unity here. They come together, and then they tell Helaman, they ask Helaman, will you be our commander? We know that you are the prophet. If you go with us, we're good. We understand this. And they were good, righteous young men who did whatever was needed. Anyways, my neighbors are getting kind of loud, so I'm going to end that one here, and I will see you in the next one.